God has given all of us a mission to make disciples here and everywhere for the glory of God. But sometimes it can feel difficult to find our place and purpose in that mission.
-10, 9.
Our church is located on the Space Coast of Florida. In our backyards, we can see rockets being launched all the time. We want our church to be a launch pad for sending people out on the mission God has for them. Here at First Baptist Melbourne, we have a goal that we call Launch 10X. Our vision is to plant 10 churches, send out 100 missionaries, train 1,000 leaders, and make 10,000 disciples in the next 10 years. The purpose of the Mission Control podcast is to share stories from within our First Baptist Melbourne faith community of people who are living out the vision of Launch 10X. Regardless of who you are, we all have a role to play. We are all involved in God's story. We pray that the stories shared through Mission Control will encourage you to see how God is calling you to be used by Him. Hello, my name is Amanda, and I'm the Communications Director here at First Baptist Melbourne, and the host of this podcast, Mission Control. Today in Mission Control, we have Aaron still with us. Aaron serves on staff here as our church planting pastor. Aaron grew up at First Baptist Melbourne and since to call to vocational ministry as a high school student. After a season of training and ministry outside of the state of Florida, God called his family back to the Melbourne area several years ago. One thing that has always struck me about Aaron is his willingness to serve in whatever area God puts him in, whether that be leading a church planting training program, finding ways to connect with people more online, or tightening screws on the chairs in the worship center. Our conversation today is centered around church planting and this God-sized goal we feel God has given our church to plant 10 churches in 10 years.
But I always feel, I'm like, they're asking me questions and I have answers for them, but I'm like, are these good answers? Like, do I really know how to plant a church?
Is that like considered imposter syndrome? When you're sitting there and you're like,
well,
am I qualified for this?
It feels like it. I'm just like, okay, so my vocation right now is to help people plant churches. And every once in a while I get this moment like, do I know what I'm even doing right now?
Fair.
I'm like, this is a lot. And like, what makes me qualified to tell other people how to do it?
That is imposter syndrome. You are describing imposter syndrome.
But I'm not like Catch Me If You Can, where I'm faking having a medical degree.
Yeah.
So, because I've been around, but I really don't feel
I don't
like
think
an expert
all of
in
imposter
this.
syndrome is like, I must be duping someone. But I think it's like, I am pretending to be this thing that maybe I'm not qualified. Like questioning your qualifications for what you're doing.
It's questioning, it's having doubt in my acumen as a church planter.
So what
church
are you? What are you doing right now here at First Baptist Melbourne? And we'll just get right into it.
I am actually the church planting pastor. So I wear just a couple hats. So I help with the online, the iCampus, interacting with people, which I love, which is a lot of fun. But then also the main part of what I do is church planting pastor, which is broadly defined as helping identify future church planters and preparing them to plant a church and preparing people in the church to go with them. Mm-hmm. The thing that I was just talking about, I am questioning my capabilities of doing as I'm sitting answering questions about it. But yeah. But yeah, no, so when I went to seminary, never, ever thought I would do something like this. But I did love training leaders and having conversations with leaders and encouraging leaders, raising up leaders. So that is a massive part of what I do. Mm-hmm. And I love it. It's really good to just sit with these guys and encourage them to keep going and help them think through these problems. And I know the pathway that we use and just kind of walk with them down the path and then see them do well and then get to be a cheerleader from the sideline and start on the next one. So
when you first felt that call to vocational ministry, what did you think at that time or discern that would look like?
I had no clue. I thought I was going crazy.
Okay.
I really did. So just to briefly describe the story, So I was here at the church. I wanted to do...
Here at the churches in First Baptist Melbourne.
I was here at First Baptist Melbourne in the youth group. I had graduated high school.
Okay.
I wanted to choose a vocation that I just thought was fun. And this is ironic. I chose forensic science because I liked chemistry and science.
So you thought, I want something that's fun. Let me deal with like dead pigs and dead bodies.
I don't know if I had a thought like that, but I thought chemistry is fun and I like puzzles.
So earlier you were telling me you're very into apocalyptic things. So I can see how some of this kind of like plays into.
Yeah, it could. It could very well. Yeah. But,
okay. So you thought forensic science.
So I chose UCF, forensic science, because they have an excellent forensic science program at the time. This is before CSI and all. I mean, it wasn't like
you
trendy.
were like cutting edge.
I was like, this is what I want to do.
Okay.
And then I had this moment. I was a chaperone at a middle school camp.
Okay.
Doug asked me to go on. Doug's our community pastor who was the youth pastor, my youth pastor at the time. And I had this like moment during worship, and it was one of those moments during worship where you could just kind of almost like tangibly feel the presence of God. It's only happened a few times in my life where it's been that just kind of intense. And I had this moment. I'm like, I never asked God what he wanted me to do with my life.
Yeah.
I had made these plans, and I'd been a Christian for a long time. And I'm like, I know you're supposed to ask, but I just did whatever I wanted to do. And it wasn't like I was running away. It was just like I was just absorbed in what I wanted to do, or just ignorant of the fact that I should probably pray and ask God. And so I prayed, and you know how those prayers go. I mean, I'm sure you've prayed that in your life, that it kind of gets you thinking, and you start. Well, immediately after I prayed, it was like I heard God's audible voice. It was 3 words. It was "tend my sheep." I had my head down on the desk, and I picked my head up because I thought somebody said it to me.
Oh, okay.
No one is around. I look around and I'm like, what is going on right now? Because I have never experienced anything since that clear, and hadn't experienced anything up to that point. So I'm just looking around. Well, I'm kind of like wandering around the campus of this college. Like, what is going on in my mind? Am I going crazy? And I was led to John, the end of John, I think it's John 20, where Jesus meets up with Peter after the resurrection. And he said, Peter, do you love me? He said, yes. He's like, feed my sheep, tend my sheep, feed my lambs is what he says. And I have it in my Bible underlined, and my hand is shaking because it was just one of those moments. And I shared it with one of my best friends. And over that summer, it was like trying to figure, like, what does this mean? And I cannot tell you, this sounds silly, but over the next month or two, it seemed like every sermon illustration was on shepherds and sheep. I was seeing like Serta mattress trucks going by. I shared it.
Confirmation after confirmation.
It was just again and again. And then I said, I don't know what's going on. And I was at it was a kids camp with a leadership group from the church. And I told him, I said, I don't know what's going on with me, but I think God's doing something and I don't know what it is. And I told him the story that night. I was backstage on the headphone hearing the in-house, for the spotlights and stage. So I'm not hearing the sermon. And the sermon was on shepherds and sheep and Jesus being the good shepherd and following him. And so all the leadership team comes up to me afterwards and they look at me like I'm some kind of psychic. They're like, what? And I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. And they're like, what is going on? I said, I don't know. And so I talked to Doug, and they're just like, maybe God's calling you into ministry. And so I started navigating down this path of, okay, so what does a minister do and what does a shepherd do? And I got the scariest advice from people. They're like, the people who treat people the meanest in the world are Christians, and pastors get run over. And that's the advice I'm getting from people. So it's like, I really think I'm supposed to be an engineer. It's like, well, engineers, they're horrible and their job is job satisfaction. That's what I was getting from people, which was kind of discouraging. But I'm like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm like, well, what do I? And then that changed my major and put me on a path to seminary. And then as I'm going through seminary, I'm like, well, what does this mean to be a shepherd? Am I preaching? And then I started to see the diversity of role.
You still went to UCF though. What did you study
went to
at
UCF? On orientation day, I switched to business.
Okay.
Because as they were listing the different majors, I'm like, that sounds great. Business sounds good. And it was management. So I was working with people, coming up with plans and systems. And I'm like, I needed something that would just help me in ministry that I would do. But I stayed at UCF. Yeah. I didn't want to. I asked about, should I go to Bible college? Or, I said, well, just plan on going to seminary. And I'm like, okay. So the plan was get my undergrad degree and go to seminary. And I did. And then in seminary, it really started to kind of focus in on where I thought I was gifted and what I thought I would do. So early on, I was looking for a specific job title.
Okay.
And I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And as I progressed through, I looked for fit. I looked for, are these people I can work with and I trust? Mm-hmm. And am I doing something that I think God has gifted me to do? Now, in any job, anything that you do, you're going to be doing things that, are you gifted to vacuum a floor? I mean, maybe somebody might have that gift. Some people like that. Some people don't. I don't know. But there's some things that you just have to do. That
sure.
Responding to 50 emails when I get to the office. Is that my spiritual gift? I mean, I doubt it. But like the majority of the things that I'm doing is that line up with who I think God has made me to be. And it's kind of shifted around to different things. I love to preach, but I love doing this. I love equipping people. I love teaching. I loved students. I loved kids. I could see myself doing anything except for lead worship. And so it was just like what I could do.
But you play an instrument.
I was very musical. I actually played in college.
Right?
Oh, my goodness.
You could be the first clarinet worship leader up there.
So, David, if you're ever listening to this, if you want me to lead worship behind a clarinet on a Sunday, that's something you're just going to have to wait and see because I'm not going to ever do that.
When's the last time you've even touched a clarinet?
I touched it more recently, but I haven't played it in a while. I showed my kids. I'm like, this is a clarinet.
You still own a clarinet then?
I own 2.
Guys.
And I own a saxophone, 2 saxophones.
Wait, do you also play saxophone?
I also play saxophone. So,
Aaron. Just saying, just putting it out there.
I was very musical, but I don't think that's my.
But you've never felt that God's calling you to.
Of all the things. I'm pretty sure that's not it.
Okay. Fair enough.
But there are a lot of things I feel like I could do and I like doing. But what I'm doing now is just like, I feel like it was made for me. And part of it is I'm getting to kind of write what it is along with the pastors. But the most important thing of why I'm here is I'm like, I'll do whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do. But I just like working with these people because I trust them very much. And we're heading in the same direction. You could be in a situation where you're doing exactly what you feel like you want to do, but with the wrong people. And it's a different situation. And you could be with the right people doing something that you don't want to do, and it feels very fulfilling because you feel like you're all moving towards. I mean, when I first started here, I was working facilities. Yeah. I love working with my hands. I like pressure washing is fun. I like fixing things.
How long were you working with facilities here?
Oh, goodness. It was at least a year. It could have been 2.
Because you painted the fellowship hall, right?
I helped paint the fellowship hall. I helped pressure wash. I was the chair fixer. So when the chairs in the sanctuary would have screws missing or stuff, job. I would sit down and fix those, which I loved doing. Change light bulbs, which was fun. It's all that stuff. But I like working with my hands and I like doing things like that. But I mean, I actually, during that time, people offered me other employment options. And I was making more money too. And we were trying to figure out what was next. And I actually said no because I just liked showing up to the office.
Wow.
I think I've told Bethany that. Well, if not, then she's hearing that now. But I think, no, we talked about that. But I just liked showing up and being around people, and it was moving somewhere. And I just wanted to, and I'm like.
Well, I think it goes back to what you're saying about being surrounded with the right people makes a huge difference. Even if you're not doing necessarily what you thought you were equipped to be doing or wanted to be doing. So it's just an interesting.
Being with people that are heading the same direction is a game changer. And there's you can't always have that. Yeah. Sometimes you need to cut your teeth other places. But having people swimming the same way as you is a big encouragement. Because it's like when I'm struggling in a ministry, I know other people are going the same direction. Whereas if it's combative or if you don't feel like you're going the same way, you always kind of feel like you're fighting for your way a little bit, and everything feels kind of adversarial. It doesn't even have to be mean, or it doesn't have to be like you're at war and getting in screaming matches, but you just feel like you're running uphill. And there's sometimes in ministry where you are put at a place where that's your ministry. You think of Jeremiah in Scripture, you think of some of these prophets, you think of even, just New Testament examples of Paul going to places and trying to do ministry where it's just uphill. I mean, sometimes you're called to that. And I think if you're called to it, if you really feel God is leading you into that, it can overcome that frustration that you feel because you're like, I'm where I'm supposed to be. But when it comes to an enjoyment of me doing what I do, I mean, I almost am like feel guilty saying I'm enjoying it so much because I'm like, well, I feel like God's going to have to move me now because I'm enjoying it. I'm happy, right? I mean, do you ever get that complex where you're like really happy and it's like God doesn't want me to enjoy what I'm doing? And
or like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop? Sure, certainly.
So if you don't talk about it, it's like it's not really happening. It's not really that bad. But.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about kind of the beginning of the call that you felt. And then now we've kind of talked about the end. But what was that path that God kind of brought you on, and how did it lead you to church planting?
Yeah, it was long. I went through seminary. The church planting seemed like a concept like being a missionary.
Okay.
It seemed like something that you could do, but it was for a particular type of person. So I wanted to, and missions at the seminary was really big. So almost in my mind, it's like, yeah, church planting is great, but I'm really going to focus on missions. And so when I was at the church I was at, we thought about being missionaries, and it didn't work with the IMB because the program got cut. But we tried to encourage our church to be involved in international missions. I led several. I took 6 trips to Peru.
Oh, okay.
We gave money to missionaries and all these things. And then towards the end of being in that church, I was there for about 5.5, 6 years. I got involved in some training at the Summit Church in Raleigh, Durham. So at the Summit Church, they had he came to chapel. J.D. Greer as the pastor. And said they want to plant 1,000 churches in a generation. And I'm like, wow. So that's a lot. And that's a long time. And then, so I'm around them and their culture, and I'm learning, they're talking about church planting, and I'm learning, being around them and hearing those things, that church planting is just kind of the normal byproduct of a church that is reaching people. That inevitably you will go into communities where there needs to be a church or there isn't one, and inevitably people will have that burden to go. And if you're discipling them, you will raise them up and send them out to those places. So it's not, and we see that in the book of Acts all over the place. Like Antioch is the famous example where they're asking each other, who started this? Like, did you start this? Did you? And nope. They're like, I don't know. And so that's where they sent Barnabas out to go check it out. And then he's like, let me go get Paul. And then that, the rest is history. But so church planting is normal. It's part of discipleship and evangelism of a healthy church. And so then I got to go out on a church plant. And at Melbourne, they wanted to start church planting after having a relationship with a church plant in Boston. And they're like, we want to do that. What I have found is from going to want to start a church plant and doing it, beyond just doing it once, is there's a learning gap there. And so I had been on a church plant. I had been a part of a church that was aggressively planting and training up and sending them out. And so when Scott asked me if I would, and this is before I was on staff, he was like, would you just help us put together something that we could use?
This was when you were still with the church plant, right?
I was, we were attending the church plant. So we left the church plant after 2 years. It was, just heading different directions. But we're like, we think the Lord led us back to Orlando for a reason. Yeah. And so we started pursuing planting a church in another part of town, of Orlando, because Orlando is just a massive area. Yeah. So we started going through, that's where we went through the assessment process. We asked if Melbourne would send us, and they agreed. And so, but in that process, they were I didn't know this. They were at the time trying to start a church planting program.
Gotcha.
To send people. So we came, I left the church plant at the time where they're stuck. And he said, well, we'll help you go plant a church. While you're doing that, will you help us get the program together? And I said, absolutely. And so, I mean, a big part of it started with normalizing church planting and when you say church planting, everybody in the church, in the congregation thinks that could be them in some way or some part. So we did a lot of that. But then I took what I saw from Summit and from our church plant and started building a residency and a program similar to that. And then when we put it together, we had an interest meeting over the summer that was very well attended. And I remember at that meeting.
What summer was this?
This was summer 19.
2019. Okay.
2019, summer of 19. It was like June or July. And I remember in the meeting, and at this point, Bethany and I, we're planning on going back to Orlando. So we're selling our house.
Were you still living in Orlando at this time?
We had a house in Orlando, but we were living across the street in the mission house,
That's
which was
right.
going to be temporary, which ended up being a little longer than temporary. But
just a few years temporary.
Yeah, it's just, it was a great time. But we were planning on going back. And I remember at the end of the meeting, Scott was like, I'm not trying to be the Holy Spirit in your life, but I would love for you to pray about being here and doing this. And at that point, I was just like, okay. I mean, I didn't know what to do. So he invited me on the staff retreat just to kind of pray and just be around everybody, which, I mean, I just loved being around them.
Were you doing facilities at the same time? Okay.
I was doing facility. I just needed to put food on the table type thing.
Sure.
And so I was doing facilities and Bethany went back to work as a nurse because we were just trying to get through. But I remember at the assessment, one of the people at the assessment asked me, if you could do anything but church planting, what would you do? And this wasn't like during the assessment time. This was like during a break.
Off the cuff conversation.
And it was one of the people who was working for NAM, and he asked me, apparently he had some inside information, but that was a whole other thing, but not at our church, but somewhere else. But he's like, if you could do anything but church planting, what would you do? And I'm like, a blindside. I'm like, I don't know. I said, not much. I think I would work for Scott or I would work for Philip, who is the person who first hired me in North Carolina and is out in Tampa. And within a month of leaving the assessment, I had job offers from both of those guys, and not like job offers from a bunch of people, like those two. Specifically those two. And so I look at Bethany and I said, I think we're not supposed to plant a church. I think we're supposed to go to Melbourne or Palmetto, Florida. And I was like, where do you want to go? And at that point, our kids had clicked in here really, really well. And so getting from we thought we were going to plant a church to now we're just going to help other people plant churches seems like a really easy thing, but it was really hard because we thought we were on this path to do it. And I think my gifts lined up with that. But then we were really feeling the Lord saying that we needed to do this. And it was a tension. It was really hard because it was like this, like when we would go back to Orlando over the next couple of years, it was hard. We felt like we weren't doing what we had set out to do. That's what it felt like. Yeah. And it was especially hard for Bethany because she loves Orlando. We met in Orlando. Our first son was born in Orlando. I grew up going to Orlando every Thanksgiving for my entire life, except for one. It's a place I love. I'm going to Orlando this weekend, right?
Because you have a lot of family in this Central Florida, Melbourne, Orlando area.
We do. We do. And we have some of our best and deepest friendships were in Orlando when we were in college. And so that was really hard. But getting here, it's like when you get to a place and you feel like it like clicks, like this is where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. And I'm just seeing God move and just incredible. Like as we start this church planting program, we had zero partnership with NAM because NAM was partnering with Send Cities. Well, right before we plant our first church, NAM makes it possible to partner with them if you plant anywhere in the state of Florida, which was not even on our radar when we started. And then God started sending us people that we weren't expecting, that heard about Melbourne and wanted to plant. And I'm like, are you sure we have not done this yet? Right? Like, are you sure you want to? I mean,
I think it goes and it speaks to going back to what you said about Summit of this is a natural organic byproduct of healthy church.
And Melbourne was ready because they had been doing international missions. They had been supporting a church plant. They were ready for the next step. And that happened. I was not a part of that, getting them ready. That was Pastor Scott. That was Brother Larry before him, getting the church ready to walk in this next thing. So a lot of times, like, well, how can we be a church planting church? Well, maybe your first step is planting the church, but maybe the first step is making church planting normal, making everybody in that church consider being a part of a church plant or helping a church plant or praying for it. And a lot of that groundwork, that tilling that soil had been done. So I walk in and God's ready to move. And I just happen to be, I look like the genius because it's working, but I'm like, I just showed up when God showed up and just said, okay, I think this is what we're supposed to do. And it starts working. And I mean, we've been tremendously blessed. So I was just talking, head into a couple assessments, this year, and I mean, the train keeps rolling. So God's been very good. So
I know you talked a lot, and this might be redundant, but you talked a lot about in the moment, it didn't feel so obvious. You thought you were going to plant a church, and then God had this kind of tangent side road for it. Now looking back, does it feel obvious, this guiding?
Yeah.
What are some of those areas that feel most obvious?
We came from back-to-back really difficult church situations, and they were for different reasons in ministry. And it was to the point where I'm like, should I be doing this?
Gotcha.
Got here, healed, and I remember I was sitting in my office complaining to Scott. I'm like, man, I can't believe I did this. He's like, but if you didn't go through that, would you be here right now? And I'm like, no. No, I know, but it was true. It was like if me graduating seminary could have seen Aaron now, I would have been shocked, because that is not a path I thought I was on. But the path I was on, staying connected in Raleigh, serving at a church where we just loved the people and they loved us very well, and we got to be connected to a church. The church that sends the most missionaries and church plants out in America. That's a pretty unique thing. And then to be a part of a church plant, and then to go through assessment, thinking this, and now I can sit across the table from a church planting couple and tell them exactly what assessment's going to be like, because we've been
walked through it. Yeah,
I can see all of these things stacking up to set the table for what we're doing now. And if I hadn't have gone through this, or I hadn't have gone through this, or I hadn't had this experience, maybe I wouldn't be as equipped to the level. But to write what I'm doing now, 5 years ago, I mean, good luck. I couldn't have fathomed that's where it would have taken me. But the benefit of hindsight is seeing where God worked when He was working, getting me somewhere that I didn't know. I just knew He was doing something. He was shaping me and molding me and molding our family. And so we're very, very blessed to have ended up here and love it.
What are some things that excite you as you look to this next season of ministry, or next phase of what we're doing here?
So it's funny, as I was talking to Scott early on, it was the idea like, well, we'll help them get it started, and then when I go plant the church, I can maybe help from afar, but we just get it up and started. And once we got it up and started, the idea of like leaving before we hit the 10, because we're trying to plant 10 churches in 10 years.
Yeah.
Leaving before we hit number 10 was like, oh no, I can't do that. Like I want to see this thing all the way through. And that's just getting me excited. Just hearing the stories of people that are called to church planting and seeing how God enables faith in them to go through some hard things and then to launch out has been really a really big blessing to see. It's what I get to do is like this kind of divine jigsaw puzzle where it's like pieces are being added and the picture is becoming clear. And we planted 10 churches in 100 years, and now we're trying to do 10 and 10, which is
nuts.
That's a great word for it. No, but like as we're seeing these pieces, it's very exciting, but it's crazy. It's like, and we like believe we can do this, but it obviously it's not us doing it, it's the Lord. But like we're on track for that, right? We had nobody last year, and now we're planning an international church. That it's just God is putting these puzzles together. I thought it would be He would send us 10 planters every year and we choose which one we want to send. He's sending us like one at a time, I mean, maybe two at a time. We're having to do a little, but it's just different. It's just cool. It's just it's so, and seeing people from the church catch a vision for planting that never would have thought about it before. And they're like, well, I could do that. And it's like, because some of the people we send out on these plants could be planters 10 years from now, 5 years from now. You just know. That's one thing we say. We say the person that walks through the door on Sunday could be our next church planter. So as a church, the idea of helping people discover that and figure that out and walk in that, I can't believe I get to do this. Like, of all the things I could be doing in life, like, this is way up there. I mean, this is so incredible.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. You've talked a lot about normalizing church planting. It's not just speaking to the church planter or the lead church planter. It's also this training and discipleship process of the core team and all of that. So I think that's cool too. Yeah.
It's getting just the average church member to grasp this incredibly, seemingly complex God-sized goal and be like, oh, I could do that. I could be a part of that. And that's been really cool to see over the past, especially the couple years as we look at the people. I mean, we're going to have sent out over 100 people in 2 years from the. We have 30 people getting ready to leave right before we finish this sanctuary.
Yeah,
and that's a testimony to God working, and I mean, who does that?
Yeah,
God does that, and so that's been really cool to see, and see them connect with that in that way.
So it started with this 10 churches in 10 years goal. Mm-hmm. It's now kind of blossomed into this whole launch 10X giant.
Blossom is a great word. Yeah.
Where were you in those conversations? what were some of your thoughts? What are your feelings?
Oh, goodness.
As we stand at basically the start line?
Well, I think God was blessing in a tremendous way with church planting. And as we were talking about it, we were really talking about sending, training people and sending them out. And we send in so many different ways other than church planting. We send people. I was sent from this church to go to seminary to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. We've sent missionaries. We've sent people even to go, like when they graduate college, to pick a strategic place to get their first career, right? So sending kind of became the thing. I just became kind of obsessed with it. I just was thinking about it a lot. And I knew Scott's heart for the nations especially. Mm-hmm. And we have sent missionaries. I don't think we had a strategic pathway, that's what I'll call it, to identify and train missionaries to be sent out. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I think we need that. I think we need to try to identify and send out. We need to, just as we set this goal of sending church planters, mm-hmm. we need to send missionaries. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about it for a little bit. And he really resonated with it. And then it came when it's like, well, we're trying to send pastors too. And we have a structure. That's what the Aspire program is seminary classes trying that. We've sent several people out doing that.
Sure.
So it became this, okay, 10 church plants, it's great, but let's try to get something together to send leaders to identify, raise up, and send people in vocational ministry. Mm-hmm. Either church planters, missionaries, or some sort of vocational ministry. It could be parachurch, something like that. Mm-hmm. Put that possibility in front of them. Nationwide, there's kind of if you talk to pastors, there are fewer people pursuing that, and it could be for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is the increase in bivocational, co-vocational ministers. Some of it is there's this idea. There's a book called "Call Out the Called" or "Call the Called," and it's people are called to do this, but they haven't identified that, and since we're not inviting them to walk in that path, they won't because they don't have a framework for it.
Gotcha.
And so I'm like, so we can do some of those things, and then it turned into, well, let's train up leaders, and it became 1,000 leaders. I'm like, okay, and then it became 10,000 disciples, right?
I was in that room,
and we're like, oh, okay. But I mean, it's and so what I was trying to we're a big church, we're a growing church, we're a church with a lot going on, and with this Launchpad momentum, which is what we called our church planning program, Launchpad. I'm like, Launchpad's a phenomenal name. Let's lean into that, and let's kind of put a hug around some of these ministries,
Mm-hmm.
and where I'm not creating the pathways of how it's going to happen, but we're going to put them in the same bucket so that we can encourage each other, and it creates a simplicity of structure.
Yeah.
So as I was talking to Scott, I was really talking about missionaries, and then it turned into, well, we could do this, well, we could do this. And then I'm like, okay, but as this is splintering out, let's try to simplify it in a way where we can swim the same direction.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been my bell I'm ringing. And so the more that I can put it in a framework of I am trying to add value to the ministry that you're doing.
Yeah.
I think the more buy-in we've gotten with that. We're
making them more
as
connected.
We're having these conversations about sending and pathways and all these things, I understand like some of them will be church planners, some of them will be missionaries, but some of them just want to serve here, and they want to serve at a level that they're not serving right now.
Yeah.
As they understand that. And so I'm like, okay, so let's put them on that path. And that led to the Discover workshop, where we're helping people understand their spiritual gifts and plug them in to serve. But at the same time, I'm hoping I identify some church planners in there. So
Yeah.
we're trying to create this regular rhythm and a goal where we're shooting towards something, but then we're talking about it church-wide. We're saying, hey, this is something that we're going to do. And then we're in the process. We spent 2 hours at a last staff meeting, maybe more, talking about this, about how we can integrate these ideas into every ministry. How can we talk about this with children? I was called in when I was in high school, right? If we can show people that there's a pathway to serve in a different way, or to be called to a ministry in a different way, then we can disciple them and train them towards that. Sure. And help them walk in that, because a lot of it is just a connection that's not attached.
It's not you creating the calling or instilling it. It's just like you're saying, connecting. You already felt this from God. Here, let's help connect where that could lead to.
In my calling, I was asking the question, what does this mean? Like, what is going on? I don't understand. What does it mean? And I had some people that I trusted, that loved me, that helped me say, and they weren't fatalistic about it. Said, this means you should be doing this. They're like, it could mean this. This is what you need to pray about and maybe pursue. And then they saw that in me too, in my character and some of those things, and they encouraged me in that. So I think there are a lot of people experiencing that in our church. And if we can talk about it more, then, I mean, we just want to be a multiplying church where we could just shoot people out to those ministries God has called them to.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give someone trying to discern that calling?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we make it do. We've got a book that is helpful. And when you think book, you're like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to read.
It's a small book.
It's a small book. It's 100 pages,
and it's a small, just like in profile.
100 pages. It's not. It's like a booklet. We even call it a booklet. Easy read, written by a seminary president. It helps calling can be kind of a squishy concept. It helps put some structure to it. I have found it to be not a perfect book, but an incredibly one of the most helpful books I can give. So we talk about that. We try to give that out. One big thing that we tell people is to start asking people that know them really well. And you don't want to be led astray or led down by your own kind of thoughts, emotions, feelings at the time. You want to test it against Scripture, and then look for affirmation from other people. So like I've had people come and talk to me as a pastor, and it's like, well, I feel like God's calling me to do this. What do you think about that? And then we just have a conversation. Yeah. And sometimes it's a hard conversation. It's like, well, I don't see that. And I'm not trying to be God in your life. I could be very wrong. I don't see that. But sometimes it's like, I totally see this. And sometimes it's us approaching someone and almost putting this, like, have you ever thought about this? That's a different thing. Well, like
Scott, with you, when you were on this totally different path and, well, what do you think about this?
If he hadn't had that conversation, I don't know. Yeah, same thing. I was just talking to someone this weekend about that as well too. So I think it's being patient, having the conversation, and to have the confidence at our church, we are creating pathways to help you get where it's going to go, wherever that may be, whether it's here, whether it's on the other side of the world. So having conversations, discerning, and that the book, just reading about what you may be going through.
We talked about the book. I don't think, did we say what the book is called?
No, it's called Is God Calling Me by Jeff Iorg, I think is how you say his name. He's the president of Gateway Seminary out in Los Angeles. If you want a copy, come up to the church office and I have a closet full. I will give you one.
He has a closet full of a few different kinds of books.
A few different kinds of books. That's one. I had about 200 copies of another book that I was managed to
Did
liquidate.
You get rid of all of them?
Oh, they're all gone. They're all gone. Otherwise,
that has been the joke around the office.
You would have seen those at this last Christmas.
Aaron loves to get free books and then get stuck with them.
I do. I gave a book away today. So,
but this is a good one. Is God calling you?
Yeah, we have lots of them because we give them out at our Discover Workshop. I give them out at just different training things. And if I think someone's wrestling with that, that's a book I'll give them because it's a really easy read and it helps put in a framework. It's a funny joke about this book is because nobody wants to give it out anymore because we had someone that we were going to hire and we gave them the book and they decided not to come here and to pursue something else because of the book. And they talked about how helpful it was and it was great. And I think I need to pursue this, but it wasn't with us. And so now the book is like...
if they're listening to it, if I do keep this in, I think they would be flattered that we were sad.
We were very sad. We were sad. They were excited. You know who you are. We were very excited about the possibility of you being here. And I now catch endless loads of grief about this book that was given to you. And
Darren Wolf now jokes that if we give it to someone that we're wanting to come here, it's an abridged version. Is God calling you? First page, yes. End book.
Chapter 2 to First Baptist Melbourne.
Not that we're the Holy Spirit in their life, but you know.
Yeah, we need one with the dots on there of our logo. But it's a good book. Any
other thoughts you have about Launchpad, Launch 10X, mission?
No, I think I'm just excited about it. I think people are being called out to it. I think people are discovering where God could potentially be using them. And I think if you walk in that faithfulness, God does amazing things in and through you. And I'm just excited to see as we look back, Darren's favorite phrase is, it's happening, right? And whenever anything's like, it's really happening, I'm like, yes, I'll never get tired of you saying that. And I think things are happening here and people are going out on that mission God has called for them to do. And it's just exciting to see.